If it were up to me, Eli Drinkwitz and yes, Dennis Gates too, would never leave Missouri. I'll explain why right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. Yes, no term limits here, not even any elections. What I say goes here on the Locked On Mizzou podcast. I am indeed your benevolent dictator here. But I will say before I start the show here, I got to remind you that from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And I have to say, we got plenty of Missouri basketball to talk about on the show today, including a real grown man type of comment from Tamar Bates. But I do want to start the program talking a little bit more big picture here about both of the revenue programs, because in my opinion, it's really obvious that if we could just sign up for another decade or two, at least in my opinion, let's sign up for another decade or two of Eli Drinkwitz right now. I'll take that for Dennis Gates, by the way, too. And let me make my first case with Drinkwitz. While is Drinkwitz a perfect college football coach? Well, no, he is not. I think his time management at times leaves a little bit to be desired, for example. But having said that, while he's not perfect, for all intents and purposes, he might as well be the perfect guy, I think, for this new environment that we have in 2025. Name, image, and likeness, the transfer portal, all of that good stuff. Well, now for, I would say, at least the third cycle in a row, Missouri is going to be a big-time net winner in the transfer portal. And if you don't believe me, look around nationally. That is very much the conventional wisdom right now. If you look at all of the portal rankings coming that are being bandied about on the good old World Wide Web. So as great as coaching searches are for my personal business, in the short term, holy cow, does my show do great numbers. When Missouri was looking for Dennis Gates, when it was hiring Eli Drinkwitz years ago, those shows do buku bucks and views for this guy. But I'll tell you this, as a fan, I hate coaching searches. I like stability. Just give me a couple guys that I know I can count on forever and ever. Think Gary Pinkel and Norm Stewart. Well, maybe we have our version of those guys right now, because as different personality-wise as Eli Drinkwitz and Gary Pinkel are in some ways, as different as their approaches are, well, they seem to have a very good working and professional relationship, maybe a personal relationship as well. Pinkel always talks very highly about Drinkwitz, as recently as just after the Music City Bowl, by the way. So to me, the main point here I want to get to is that while it's pretty obvious that right now that Eli Drinkwitz he's basically in charge of the athletic department at this point. He can do no wrong as of this moment. But of course, Dennis Gates is a little bit different of a story, isn't he? Because while Missouri's having a great year 3 under Gates so far, obviously year 2 and year 1 couldn't have been much of a bigger contrast there. I don't think I need to remind you of what happened last season. That's for darn sure. But I honestly think I've seen enough. I really have. After year 1 of Gates, I really thought that, hey, we've got the guy. I've seen enough basketball in my life. I just viscerally understand what good basketball looks like. I really do. And after that first season of Gates, I thought we were good to go. And I gave 2 thumbs up to the Desiree Reed-Francois contract extension. It's almost like when you're a small market baseball team, like, say, the Kansas City Royals, when you have a superstar like Bobby Witt Jr., yeah, maybe it's a little bit early to give him the $150 million extension or whatever it is. But when you're in that situation, it's a gamble worth making, I think, from the Royals' perspective. And I thought the same thing about Dennis Gates. But of course, after last season's, frankly, disaster of a basketball season for Missouri, I had to at least question myself. I had to at least pump the brakes and go, wait a second here. Do you go 0-19 if you're really a sure thing basketball coach? So I at least had to question myself. But as all of you everydayers know, I definitely was leaning toward what I saw the first time. So fortunately for Dennis Gates, he had that great first season, because if last season had been his first season, well, everybody's perception would have been a heck of a lot different. But now, with the turnaround of this third season here, of course, I don't know where Missouri's going to finish here. There's a lot of season left to be played here. But honestly, I've seen enough to, at the very least, say that Missouri is really good this season. As I record here, in about an hour or so, the top 25 is going to be released, and I suspect Missouri will be in it, maybe even in the top 20 or so. The Tigers obviously had a couple of really impressive victories this past week, to the point where I have people correcting me even on how good Missouri is. Listener Jimmy says, hey, John, we're actually tied for second place, not third. Well, I would point out that on Saturday when I recorded that, Ole Miss had not suffered its first loss yet. So at the time, I was correct. But you are correct. Missouri is tied for second place currently in the SEC. And Mike says, John, I believe you're wrong. The best is yet to come. Well, again, I was saying Missouri is playing its best basketball so far. If what Mike is saying, that Missouri can be even better as the season goes along here, I completely agree, because actually, after I stopped recording my podcast, just sort of the results of everything just kind of hit me. And I was just jumping around saying, hell yes, that type of thing. Because again, I just love good basketball on just a visceral level. And this is truly the second time in 3 years that I've felt it with Dennis Gates. Again, oddly, the other example is a complete and total disaster. But to me, this kind of positive is so rare that I'm seeing right now. This type of positive energy is so rare that I'm choosing to focus on that. Trust me, I get this sport. I really do. And most importantly, Dennis Gates gets basketball too. I feel it deep down in my soul. This is not a statistical argument. This is not a spreadsheet argument. This is my truth. That's what it is. Now, one thing about Missouri so far this season, for the majority of this season, I would say, is that the Tigers, well, when they get into the half-court offense, tend to bog down a little bit. And when they don't get to the free throw line, well, it becomes a bit of a challenge, again, at least for most of the season. But I will say, I thought the big thing this past Saturday against Arkansas is that Missouri still got to the free throw line and won the free throw attempt battle against Arkansas as usual. But more importantly, I thought Missouri's half-court offense looked so much better, and I think that really has raised the ceiling for this Missouri team for the rest of the season. So let's talk more about that later on the program here in just a minute. First, though, I do want to tell you about Prizepicks, because the place to get real money sports action is Prizepicks. With more than 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prizepicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prizepicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. And while Travis Kelce came through for me, Lamar Jackson just a tiny bit short there. Does the NFL count sacks against passing yards? If so, that may have screwed me there. But what the heck? What you got to do is you got to find a combination of at least two players, check the more or less on their stats. It's really as simple as that. And depending on how many guys you pool into one entry, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. So get ready to run your game this football season. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 for just playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prizepicks. It's Prizepicks. Run your game. Not as many free throw attempts or trips to the line for Missouri as has been usual this season. But again, the Tigers had more than Arkansas, and that's what matters. And quite honestly, that was a let 'em play kind of game. That was a physical basketball game called by the officials in both halves. So frankly, not only were there no complaints from me about the officiating, I actually rather enjoyed it. It was nice not having so many constant stoppages, especially as compared to the Florida game. But again, most importantly of all, while the Tigers still got to the line and challenged the rim for sure, much more importantly, the half-court offense I thought was the most fluid I've seen all season from Missouri. And again, it wasn't just a put your head down and force the referee to blow a whistle style of offense. There was really good ball movement and just passing and guys playing together. And I don't know exactly what the change was. I think some of it maybe taking Josh Gray out of the starting lineup and getting a little bit more offensive-minded of a group in early for Missouri. It seems to have gotten the Tigers in a little bit better of a rhythm offensively. But regardless of the reason, if Missouri can keep that type of half-court execution up, because it wasn't just that Missouri was knocking down threes at a high clip, which I believe they made about 46% from three in the ball game. It was the shots that they were getting. Those are repeatable, good shots. Those are shots that you're going to take all day if you're a Missouri fan. So this is all just so incredibly encouraging to me on about a bajillion different levels. And you couple what hopefully is a better half-court offense down the stretch here, and actually you couple that with Missouri's transition game, its fast break game. The Tigers are bigger and more athletic by far than they've been in the previous two seasons under Dennis Gates. This is also easily the best defensive team that Missouri has had under Gates. If all of this is adding up to a possible special season for you, well, I'm starting to feel it as well. I don't want to go too far just yet, but whether or not this is a truly special Missouri basketball season or not, well, we're going to find out here in a couple months, and it's going to be a really fun few weeks one way or the other. Now, if you think I'm going a little bit far with my positive takes on Missouri basketball and how high I think that their ceiling is right now, well, Dennis Gates seems to agree with me. He said after the game, we're not even playing at our peak. I don't think we're playing well. I'm dead serious. You guys may laugh at it, but I'm telling you, we have about 2 or 3 more steps to go. And by the way, my friend and listener, Jenna Onofrio, I brought up her comment an episode or two ago. She completely agrees with Dennis Gates as well. Dennis also says about his squad, they don't want to be ranked. They don't care. They do not care about any of that. Our goal at the end of the day is to be in San Antonio, Texas, where, of course, the Final Four is being held this season. So, you know what? Dennis Gates never been a guy to shy away from putting hefty expectations on his team. Well, he's doing it here once again, and this doesn't seem to be just lip service to me. And to Tamar Bates, from his perspective, he says, I see we're starting to really fall in love with the preparation for games. I knew that we weren't still going to be riding high off that win that we had on Tuesday. And to Tamar's point there, the fact that the Tigers weren't still riding high, I mean, maybe they were, but the point is, I'm sure they felt good about themselves. The point is, they were obviously locked in on Arkansas on Saturday. They were very much ready to take on an Arkansas team that was obviously desperate for a win, but Missouri played such good basketball, especially in the first half. Well, they just took it right from them very impressively. And to Bates' point about really his team falling in love with preparation, well, I think that's one of the big advantages of the transfer portal. If you play it properly, obviously Bates, a portal guy now in his second season with Missouri. Then you have guys like Jacob Cruz, Tony Perkins, who have played a ton of college basketball so far, guys you just brought into the program. Heck, to the point, Tamar Bates sitting with his incredibly acute daughter in the post game. I think Jacob Cruz and Tamar, I believe they're both married. They have kids, all that good stuff. Just to the point of these guys are veterans, man, and just the fact that they're around and showing the young guys, the freshmen who aren't playing a ton right now. I just noticed that Peyton Marshall, who got 6 minutes in the ball game, he was hugging on everybody after the game, the veterans, and had as big a smile on his face as anybody. So it's easy to do when your team's winning, but I'll tell you this, the fact that guys like Tamar Bates and Jacob Cruz and Tony Perkins and, of course, Mark Mitchell and Josh Gray, Marquez Warwick, all of these veteran players are showing these young guys the way. So, darn it, I really, really want all of these freshmen to be around next year. I see them seemingly buying into the team and developing real friendships with the younger guys, the older guys, and everything. I don't know. To steal a line from Fox Mulder, I want to believe. I really do. And to steal a line from the wrestling fan from years ago, it's still real to me, damn it. I want to believe. So I had one listener who he said, hey, let's rank all of our players. And, well, I don't know, the first 5 was probably in no particular order. Just put the starting 5 down there. But to his point, number 6, he says, second team All Big Ten, Tony Perkins. Number 7, Josh Gray. Number 8, Marquez Warwick, who again was the leading scorer in college basketball entering this season. Marcus Allen, Jacob Cruz, Aiden Shaw, then all the freshmen. And then he ends it with saying, my God. In other words, to his point, Missouri really does have about everything you need in terms of, hey, we've got a big man in Josh Gray. If there's a game where it seems like we need a really big physical presence who can control the paint, well, that's what Josh Gray is for. But if we want to play 5 out and put a lot of shooting and offense and dribble penetration on the court, well, that's kind of what our starting offense looks like. And then, of course, with Tony Perkins, if you need more ball handling, put him and Anthony Robinson in the game at the same time. And there's been a lot of talk, including from me, about Marquez Warwick and his minutes that have fluctuated back and forth at times. He only got 2 minutes in this previous game against Arkansas, and my thing was he needs to be a regular part of this rotation. But let me defend Dennis Gates here for a second. When you put up 52 points in the first half, when your offensive execution in the half court is basically perfect in the first half, well, what does Marquez Warwick bring to the table mostly? It's scoring and perimeter scoring. Missouri just didn't need that in the first half. So occasionally, somebody like Marcus Allen is just going to make a little bit more sense to play, to couple with Caleb Grill when he's got it going like he's got it going. Trent Pierce knocked down a couple threes. Tamar Bates hit 3, including a bunch early in the ball game. We just didn't really need what Warwick brought to the table in that particular matchup. But don't worry, there's going to be games when we're very, very much going to need his offensive touch and scoring ability off the bench. So don't worry about Warwick just yet. I'm just impressed and continually am impressed with all of these guys who are on the bench. They come in, and although their roles fluctuate from game to game, they really seem like they're ready to come in, play hard, and execute. That's to all of their individual credits and also the coaching staff too. And coming up, JB says that he was waiting for the parking lot pod with my father post-game. We'll have an explanation for why there was no parking lot pod this time around, at least. I'll talk about that coming up. And also, I think Friday Night Heights should continue to be a bigger deal, and also some quick thoughts on tonight's national championship game as well. But first, let's talk about a FanDuel, because from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. And speaking of action, boy, if you had the Chiefs, how much did you love that safety that KC took intentionally at the end of the game, huh? That was a little bit painful, I have to say. But next week, Chiefs currently in the AFC title game, -1.5 against the Bills. I got to say, I think the Chiefs are going to do it again. I don't want to sound like arrogant Chiefs fan, but there it is. I think they're going to three-peat, folks. But regardless of what you think, you got to check out FanDuel.com, the easiest place to bet, to do live wagering, and no waiting around for your winnings as well. Get paid instantly when you win. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. So I felt like I got the post-game podcast for Arkansas out in a pretty timely fashion, but did have some people saying, hey, what happened to the parking lot podcast? Well, honestly, we just had, and by we, I mean my father and I, had developed a little bit better of an exit strategy from the parking lot in this game. So the parking lot pod was simply unnecessary. Last time we were caught in the lot for, gosh, it felt like a good hour or so, but this time, well, I still had the laptop out and was doing prep on the way home, that type of deal. So still used my time well, had the Rode mic ready to go and everything, just wasn't ultimately necessary. And speaking of things that are unnecessary, just quickly, former St. Louis high school player Jamison Williams, well, here's the deal. When you're Ben Johnson, when you're any offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, for the Missouri Tigers, I don't care who it is, if you're going to call a wide receiver pass or a running back pass, something like that, I'm just telling you, he's gunsta throw it. There's 100%, I'll say 99% chance. I think I can remember one time in my life I saw a wide receiver who was going to throw the ball, think better of it, and actually throw the ball out of bounds. But normally, again, those guys are guns to throw it. It's YOLO time. You only live once. You only get to pass once in the NFL playoffs. Yeah, this is my time to shine, baby. If you think I'm throwing this thing out of bounds, you're out of your mind. So I'm just telling you, if you're going to call a wide receiver pass, you better be able to live with the fact that there is no chance this guy's going to throw the ball away. Please realize this. All of football coaching, and don't blame the receiver. They're going to do what they're going to do. Please. And the college football national championship game is tonight, and I got to say, 8 teams just still feels like the right amount to me. If we're going to expand the field, to me, we don't need any more than 8. And it's not just important, by the way, in figuring out the right number of teams. To me, it's every bit as important, if not more important, to figure out what the right length of the playoffs should be. To me, 3 weeks is plenty. This 4th week, especially, it's basically a week and a half, that type of deal. This 4th week here has just really dragged out, at least in my humble opinion. And you might say, well, that's not that different than the NFL playoffs. Well, I would say that's actually a bug, not a feature, because the NFL regular season is also so much longer than the college football regular season as well. To me, the college football playoff is just, the length of it is overwhelming the regular season a little bit. Not just in terms of the importance of those games, but really just by the sheer length. And I will say, while I've focused on the length of the playoffs here, well, expanding it further, yes, it makes the playoff more important in some ways, but I have to say, whether you think this, if you think the trade-off of the longer and bigger expanded college football playoff is worth it, well, then fine. I mean, that's certainly a subjective argument to be sure there. But in my opinion, there's what's not subjective is that the Ohio State-Michigan game, for example, it's no longer what it used to be. It simply has been diminished. We saw it this past season. Under normal circumstances, certainly under the BCS system, even under the old 4-team playoff, well, not only would Ohio State not have made it after losing to Michigan, well, Ryan Day probably would have been fired because that's how important that game is to the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Michigan Wolverines. So to me, any lessening of the Ohio State-Michigan game, for example, not just that, of course, but all of those type of rivalries, I'm sorry, but that is a loss. That is a loss to the sport and to college football. But if you think that trade-off is worth it, okay, fine. By all means, make that argument. But don't tell me that Michigan and Ohio State means as much as it used to, because it simply does not. That is a game that would have been the absolute end of Ohio State's season. It would have been a death knell. It would have been, oh, this season is an utter failure and we have to find a new football coach now. And instead it's, whatever, just another regular season game. I'm being a little hyperbolic there. I know it's more important than that, but obviously, this game has been diminished, and that is just a gigantic L from my personal perspective. But hey, at least we got to see SMU in the playoff. That's what's really important, right? I think we're maybe missing the forest for the trees a little bit here with this expanded playoff talk. But that's just me. As always, you can weigh in as well. LockedOnMizzou@gmail.com or anywhere on social media at LockedOnMizzou. So until next time, I am John Miller. This has been Locked on Mizzou.